They said the plus-size girl could never be loved, until the alpha vampire asked for her hand. The village of Ashvale lay hidden between dark forests and jagged mountains, where mist clung to every stone and whispered secrets of forgotten times. The villagers moved quietly through the narrow streets, their voices hushed, their eyes wary. In this place, life was hard, and people judged quickly. Among them lived Elara, a girl whose laughter could warm even the coldest winter night, yet whose heart often felt the weight of the world's cruelty. Elara was different, the whispers said. Her body was round, soft, and full, unlike the slender girls who walked proudly through the market square.
No one will ever love her, the women whispered behind their hands.
She is too bold, too loud, too much. The words stung, but Elara had learned to walk past them with her head held high, hiding the ache in her chest behind a quiet smile. She loved the forest most of all. There, she could breathe without judgment. The trees leaned like old friends, the streams sang lullabies only she could hear, and the shadows of the woods seemed to wrap around her like a cloak of safety. Sometimes she imagined that the world beyond Ashvale might be kinder, though she had never dared to leave the village's protective mountains. It was on a night bathed in blood-red moonlight that the world began to shift for her. The moon rose large and ominous, casting long shadows across the cobbled streets. Elara had stayed late, gathering herbs at the edge of the forest, her basket heavy with the scents of rosemary and sage. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a chill that made her shiver. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. Tall, impossibly lean, and wrapped in a cloak as dark as midnight itself. The stranger moved with a grace that seemed unnatural. His eyes were like shards of ice, brilliant and piercing, yet they held a depth of something unspoken, pain, longing, and a strange, magnetic curiosity. The villagers would have run screaming if they had seen him, but Elara felt her feet rooted to the ground, drawn by something she could not name. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling, though not with fear entirely. "I am Kael," he said, his voice deep, smooth, and commanding.
"I mean you no harm. Not yet."
The way he said those words made it feel like the night itself had shifted, like the air had grown heavy with secrets. She sensed power in him, an ancient, dangerous kind, and yet there was also a strange gentleness, a flicker of something almost human beneath the shadow. "You should leave," she said cautiously. "This forest, it is not safe at night." He tilted his head, studying her with eyes that seemed to look right into her soul. "Perhaps," he said softly, "but some things, some people, are worth the danger." Elara's cheeks flushed. She did not understand why his words sent a shiver through her, nor why her heart felt both frightened and strangely alive. From that night on, Kael returned, always under the moon's gaze, always silent at the edge of the forest. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were heavy with meaning, and each glance carried a weight that made her pulse quicken. The villagers noticed her absence more often now, whispering that the girl had grown bold or foolish. "No mortal girl can walk near the alpha vampire and survive," they said. "She courts death itself." Yet Elara found herself thinking of him constantly. She began seeing the world differently. The shadows held secrets, the wind carried messages, and even the darkest night seemed to glow when he was near. Her dreams became vivid, full of strange landscapes and ancient halls, and always he was there, waiting, watching. One evening, as the moon hung low, Kael finally spoke more than a few words. He appeared at the edge of the village again, his presence commanding, his eyes bright under the silver light. "Come with me," he said. "I will show you a world you cannot imagine."
A world where you are not invisible. Elara's breath caught.
Part of her wanted to run, to stay where it was safe, where the villagers' whispers could not reach, but another part, deeper, stronger, wanted to follow. Something in his eyes promised freedom, and perhaps something like love. I I don't know if I can, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You can, Cale replied, his tone almost tender, though still edged with a danger she could not ignore. And you will. I will not let harm touch you. With trembling hands, Elara placed her basket aside and stepped forward. Every step toward him felt like crossing into another world. The forest grew darker around them, yet somehow brighter, as if the night itself held its breath. Cale extended his hand and she hesitated, then took it. The warmth of his touch was unlike anything she had ever felt. Intense, electrifying, terrifying, yet comforting. That night, the forest seemed alive. The shadows moved as if they had a will. The wind whispered warnings, and the moon cast their figures long and strange across the earth. Day. Cale led her deeper, past trees twisted with age, past streams that glowed faintly under the red light, until they came to a cliff that overlooked the mountains. Look, he said, gesturing. The valley stretched below them, mist curling like smoke, and the stars above seemed closer, larger, almost within reach. This world, it is vast, full of secrets, and yet even here, I have waited for you. Back. Elara's chest tightened. His words were beautiful, but also confusing. How could someone like him want someone like her? She had grown up believing herself unworthy, taught by the harsh eyes of the village that no one could love her. And yet here he was, offering not only his protection but something else, a recognition, a kind of reverence. You speak as if I am special, she said softly. You are, Cale replied, his voice steady, unwavering. That special is not always what the world sees. Sometimes it is what the heart knows, even when the world refuses to believe. The words made her heart ache and swell at the same time.
All her life she had felt unseen, unvalued, and yet here was someone who looked at her as though she were a treasure the world had failed to notice.
They stayed at the cliff's edge until the moon dipped low, until the night grew cold, and even then neither spoke much more. There was no need. Their silence was filled with unspoken promises, questions, and the first threads of trust. When they finally returned to the edge of the village, Cale's presence began to fade into the shadows. Tomorrow, he said, you will see more, if you choose to follow. Elara nodded, though her thoughts were a storm. Could she truly follow this mysterious, powerful being? Could she leave the world she knew for one she did not understand? And yet, deep in her heart, she knew she wanted to. She wanted to see what lay beyond the mountains, beyond the whispers, beyond the fear that had held her small for so long. That night, as she lay in her small room, the shadows of the forest still clinging to the window, she dreamed of Cale. She dreamed of dark halls lit with strange, flickering lights, of voices whispering secrets of centuries past, and of a presence that was both dangerous and tender. Her heart ached with longing, and her mind raced with questions. Who was this alpha vampire? Why had he chosen her? And most importantly, could someone like her, someone who had always been told she was unworthy, truly be loved? As dawn broke over Ashvale, mist curling over the streets and rooftops, Elara made her decision. She would not hide any longer. She would step into the unknown, guided by courage, curiosity, and the strange, impossible hope that had begun to grow in her heart. And so, the girl who had been told she could never be loved prepared to follow a shadow into a world where danger and desire danced side by side. The forest grew darker as Elara followed Cale through twisting paths she had never seen before. The moon hung like a guardian in the sky, casting silver light that flickered through the trees. Every step felt surreal, as if she were walking into a dream, one that shimmered with danger and beauty alike. Kale's hand was steady around hers, but she could feel the power flowing through him, a presence that both protected and warned. After what felt like hours, the trees parted, revealing a vast fortress carved from black stone, its towers reaching into the clouds, crowned with spires that seemed to pierce the night sky. The gates were open, as though expecting them, and a soft hum of magic pulsed through the air. Elara's breath caught. She had never seen anything like it. It was beautiful and terrifying at once, a place of shadows and secrets. "Welcome," Kael said, his voice carrying easily over the stones. "This is my home." The air smelled faintly of old incense and cold stone, a scent both foreign and strangely comforting. Inside, the halls were vast and high, lit with sconces that burned with an ethereal light. Bayan. Shadows moved along the walls as though alive, whispering in voices she could almost understand.
She realized quickly that she was no longer in her small, safe village.
Bay. Here, rules were different, and life was measured in strength, power, and cunning. Kael led her through the corridors, each step echoing softly. Along the way, she glimpsed others, figures pale and elegant, moving with the grace of predators. Their eyes followed her, wary, curious, and in some cases judgmental. Kael's presence seemed to command them. They bowed or stepped aside silently, but their gazes lingered.
"These are my
"Companions," Kael said, though his tone was brief, almost distant. "They will watch you, but they will not harm you if you show respect."
Elara nodded, feeling a flutter of nervousness in her chest.
But she had never been among people so different from herself, people who seemed carved from the night itself. Yet Kael's hand on her shoulder grounded her, a silent promise that she was not alone. He guided her to a chamber high in the fortress, where the windows looked out over the valley below. The moonlight spilled across the stone floor, casting long shadows that seemed to dance. Barry. Here, the world outside felt distant, almost unreal. "You must learn to see this world," Kael said, turning to her. "It is not what you think. Strength comes in many forms, and power is not always cruel." "Some power protects." Elara listened, trying to absorb his words. But she still felt small and unworthy. But in this place, she sensed possibilities she had never imagined. She could feel the stirrings of courage in her chest, a longing to grow, to understand, and to claim her own strengths. Over the following days, Kael showed her the fortress's many secrets. Hidden libraries held books that whispered forgotten knowledge, halls where music seemed to float without being played, and gardens where plants glowed faintly in the eternal twilight. Elara wandered with wide eyes, fascinated by every detail. And slowly the fortress began to feel less like a prison, and more like a place of learning, a place where she could discover herself. But even as she explored, Kael's presence was a constant. Desk. He watched her with intensity, his piercing eyes studying her every move. When he spoke, it was deliberate, often in riddles that she had to unravel. Times, he would reach out, touching her hand or guiding her gently, and each time her heart raced. She was aware of the tension between them, a strange mix of fear, curiosity, and something deeper, something dangerous. One evening, Kael led her to a balcony overlooking the mountains. The sky was painted with shades of crimson and violet as the sun dipped below the horizon. "Do you see?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "The world is larger than you know. You could walk through it unnoticed, or you could shape it. You could choose to hide, or you could stand and be seen." Breaths. Elara's eyes filled with tears. All her life she had been told she was invisible, that no one would ever love her, that she was too much for the world to bear. And yet here was a being of unimaginable power telling her she could be seen, that she could matter. I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice trembling.
You can. Kale said firmly.
I see you. I see everything you are.
That is enough. The words warmed her, yet they also stirred a new unease. Could someone like him truly care for someone like her? Could love exist in a place so full of danger, power, and darkness? Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed. The other vampires watched silently, their expressions difficult to read. Some seemed curious, others wary. Elara could feel their judgment, but Kyle never wavered. He was her guide, her protector, and in ways she could not yet name, her equal. Days passed, each filled with lessons in the ways of the fortress, its magic, and its people. Elara learned quickly, discovering a sharpness of mind and courage that surprised even her. She began to understand that her value was not in how others saw her, but in the strength she carried within. Kale noticed this change, and though he would not speak of it aloud, his admiration for her grew, mixing with a desire he had long buried. Yet danger always lingered at the edges of their world. One night, as the wind howled through the mountains, a rival faction of vampires approached the fortress. They moved with silent purpose, shadows slipping through the trees, seeking to challenge Kale's rule. Elara sensed them first, the hair on her arms standing on end, the forest feeling suddenly alive with threat. By a space of snow, Kale appeared beside her, eyes glowing in the dim moonlight. "They have come," he said quietly. "You must stay close." Elara nodded, fear and exhilaration mingling in her chest. She had never faced anything like this, yet she felt a strange courage, as though the fortress and Kale's presence gave her a strength she had never known. The attackers struck swiftly, their movements precise and dangerous. Kale fought with a power that was almost terrifying, moving like a shadow made flesh. Elara watched, heart pounding, as he protected the fortress and those within it. In that moment she realized something she had never admitted before. She trusted him. Not blindly, but completely, with a faith that startled her. When the battle ended, the attackers fled, leaving the fortress intact, but leaving a lingering sense of unease. Guile approached Elara, his cloak fluttering in the wind, and placed a hand gently on her cheek. "You have courage," he said, his voice soft but intense. "You are braver than you know." Elara felt heat rise to her face, not from shame, but from something entirely new. Pride? Happiness? Or perhaps the fluttering of something deeper, something she had not dared name. Love. "Why do you care for me?" she asked quietly, her eyes searching his. Kale's gaze softened, a shadow of something almost human flickering across his face. "'Cause you are not afraid to be yourself," he replied. "Because in a world full of darkness, you shine. And because, for the first time in centuries, I see someone I do not want to lose." The words struck her with the force of a storm. All her life she had been told she was unworthy, unlovable, invisible. And here was someone, immortal, powerful, feared, telling her that she mattered, that she could be loved. But the night held more than tenderness. As she looked into Kale's eyes, she sensed the shadows lurking just beyond the fortress walls. There were others, waiting, watching, perhaps plotting. Their peace was fragile, their bond tested by forces neither of them could fully control. And yet in that moment none of that seemed to matter. Elara felt the stirrings of something she had never dared hope for. A connection that could withstand fear, danger, and doubt. The fortress, once a place of mystery and shadows, now held a promise. A possibility that she could step into a world where she was not only seen but cherished. The wind howled through the mountains, carrying the scent of night and magic. Kale and Elara stood together on a balcony, two figures framed against the vast expanse of sky, bound by a thread of trust, curiosity, and the first sparks of something deeper. The fortress was quiet after the attack, but the silence felt heavy as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Elara moved carefully through the halls, her steps echoing softly against the black stone. She could still feel the shadow of fear lingering in the corners of her mind, the memory of attackers moving through the forest, eyes glinting with malice. She had never known such danger, yet she also felt something new, something she had never felt in her life before. Courage. Kael followed her, his presence constant, silent, and commanding. They did not speak at first. Words felt unnecessary when the tension was so thick between them. Instead, he walked beside her, a shadow and a guardian, and she found comfort in his silence. At last they reached a small, hidden chamber, deep within the fortress. The room was warm, lit by a single glowing crystal suspended from the ceiling. Outside, the wind whispered against the fortress walls, carrying faint echoes of the night. Here, they were alone, away from eyes that judged, away from the whispers of other vampires. The attack fights in the back. The Cass is paid. Cassie. You were brave. Ah! Elara's heart swelled, but she looked away, embarrassed. I was scared, she admitted. Tss. I still am. I don't know why I'm here, why you brought me into this world. It's dangerous, and I'm just me. I'm nothing like you. Kael stepped closer, his eyes softening. Do not say that. You are not nothing. You are more than you know. And he paused, struggling with a weight he rarely let show. I have not felt this in centuries. A desire, not just to protect, but to care, to trust, to love. Elara's breath caught. His words were unlike anything she had imagined. Love? Someone like him, powerful, feared, immortal, feeling love for someone like her? It seemed impossible. Yet in his eyes, she saw truth. She saw vulnerability hidden beneath the mask of the Alpha. What do you mean? She asked softly. Kael turned, his gaze distant, troubled. I have a curse, he said, his voice heavy. It has haunted me for centuries. Every soul I have cared for, I have lost. And worse, those I love, I risk destroying. Rage, darkness, I cannot always control it. I have tried, failed, and watched the world fall apart around me. The stories she had heard about vampires, about power, danger, immortality, suddenly made sense. Kael was not just a ruler or a predator. He was a man trapped in a prison of his own making, a curse he could not escape. Then why me? She whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. Because, he said, his eyes locking onto hers, you do not fear me. You do not try to change me. You see me and you accept me even with all that darkness inside. And I cannot bear the thought of losing you, even before it begins. She had spent her life believing she was unworthy, invisible, and unloved. And now here was Kael, revealing a pain she could barely comprehend, telling her that she mattered. That she was special. That he trusted her with his heart, dangerous as it might be. For a long moment, they stood in silence, two souls exposed, the weight of centuries pressing between them. The room felt smaller, warmer, filled with the tension of unspoken words. Elara wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but fear and wonder held her tongue. Finally, Kael moved closer, his hand brushing against hers. Do you understand? He asked. I cannot guarantee safety. I cannot guarantee peace. But I can promise that. I will fight for you. That I will not let harm touch you if I can prevent it. That I see you truly for the first time in my endless life. Her life had been small, quiet, marked by whispers and judgment. And yet here, in this fortress of shadows, she felt seen. Des. She felt wanted. She felt... Des, I see you too, she whispered. I see all that you are. And I want to be here, with you, even if it is dangerous. Kale's hand tightened around hers, a silent vow passing between them. The air between them hummed with possibility, the tension of fear and longing twisting into something beautiful. But the night was far from over. Even as they shared their confession, Elara sensed movement in the fortress. Shadows slipped through the corridors faster than any human could move, and the air thickened with the scent of intrusion. "They are coming," Kale said quietly, his eyes narrowing. "The faction that attacked before, they are returning."
And this time, they will not stop until they have broken us.
Elara's pulse quickened, a mix of fear and determination rising inside her. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands.
"Basta stay." "Stay close," Kale said. "Trust me. And be ready. You have strength, Elara, more than you realize. Do not doubt it now." The attack came swiftly, like shadows falling from the moonless sky. The rival faction of vampires struck with precision, their movements almost like a storm. Kale moved through them with terrifying grace, his power like a force of nature. But he could not be everywhere at once. Elara followed him, heart pounding, instincts sharpening. She realized that she was not helpless. She had learned, even in these few short days, to observe, to react, to trust herself and Kale. Together they became a force, their movements in sync, their bond growing stronger with every moment of danger. But the battle was not fair. One of the rival vampires broke through the defenses, targeting Elara directly. Breaths rasped through the fluids, speaking about half a mile, and half faced close. Abruptly after his path was dead. His eyes coughed restraint. His cloak swept like a shadow, and with a single motion he sent the attacker fleeing into the night. Elara's chest heaved with relief. She had come close to fear she could not contain, and yet she had survived. And Kale had been there to protect her. She realized, in that instant, the depth of her feelings. Fear, trust, longing, and love, all intertwined. When the attackers finally retreated, the fortress fell silent once more. Kale led Elara to the balcony where they had spoken days before, the night sky glowing faintly above. He looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, and then softening, almost tender. "You were brave," he said. "Braver than I imagined." I am proud of you, Elara." "I could not have done it without you," she admitted. "And perhaps I don't know if I am ready for all this, for this world, for you." Kale's hand lifted to her cheek, gentle and grounding. "You do not need to be ready. You only need to choose. And you have chosen already in coming here and trusting me. That is enough." Elara's heart swelled, a mixture of awe, fear, and longing. The fortress, the shadows, the dangers, all of it seemed less frightening now because she was not alone. And for the first time, she felt a power she had never known. The power to stand beside someone she loved, even in a world full of darkness. But the night was not done testing them. As they turned to return inside, Elara noticed movement at the edge of the balcony, a figure cloaked in shadows watching from afar. Her heart caught. Kale followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing, and she saw the tension flare in him, a warning she could feel in her bones. "They are still out there," he said quietly. "Waiting. They will return." Elara swallowed, a mixture of fear and determination rising inside her.
Then we will be ready, she said, her voice firm.
Together. Kael's expression softened, a rare smile touching his lips. "Together!" he echoed. And for the first time, Elara saw a glimpse of hope in the alpha vampire's eyes, a flicker of light in centuries of shadow. The night stretched on, the wind whispering through the fortress, carrying promises of danger, love, and the trials yet to come. Elara realized that her life had changed forever. She had stepped into a world of shadows and power, of curses and secrets, but she had also stepped into a world of possibility. A world where she could be seen, wanted, and loved. And, though the rival vampires lingered, waiting in the darkness, Elara knew that for the first time she would not face them alone. Kael was by her side, and together they would face whatever the night, or the world, threw at them. The sun had barely risen when the fortress of Blackstone stirred with unease. The wind carried whispers of shadows, and the air was thick with tension. Elara stood at the balcony, her heart pounding with anticipation. She had trained, learned, and grown in these halls. She had discovered courage she did not know she possessed, and had learned that strength was not only in muscle or magic, but in the heart and mind. Kael stood beside her, tall and unyielding as ever. His eyes, usually sharp and unreadable, now held a warmth reserved for her alone. For centuries he had walked a path of darkness, but with Elara he had found something unexpected, a light he thought he had lost forever. "They are coming," Kael said quietly, his voice steady, though a shadow of concern lingered. "This is the force that knows my curse. They know my weakness, and they will not stop until they break us." Elara's fingers tightened around the railing. "Then we fight," she said, voice firm, echoing her newfound resolve. "Together." The sun dipped below the horizon as the first signs of the threat appeared. Figures cloaked in darkness emerged from the forest, moving with supernatural speed and precision. The rival faction had returned, but they were no longer the only enemy. There was something older here, something far more dangerous, a presence that chilled even Kael's ancient heart. The fortress became alive with movement. Vampires loyal to Kael readied themselves, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. Elara moved among them, steady and calm. She felt the thrill of fear, yes, but she also felt the fire of determination. No longer would she cower. No longer would she allow herself to be invisible. The battle began beneath the rising moon, which now hung low and red in the sky. Shadows clashed against shadows, the sound of movement and magic echoing through the fortress walls. Kael fought with a force that was almost terrifying, his speed unmatched, his strength seeming to bend reality. Elara watched closely, following his lead, ready to act when needed. The older, darker force revealed itself at last. A figure emerged from the deepest shadows of the forest, tall, cloaked in black, and with eyes that burned like coals. This being knew Kael's curse, his weakness, and the pain he carried. Its presence alone seemed to drain the light from the night, casting a pall over the battlefield. "You should not have come, Alpha," the figure hissed, voice like cold steel. "She is not yours to claim." Kael's eyes narrowed, and he moved to shield Elara, his cloak sweeping around them like a protective storm. "She is mine," he said, voice low and deadly, "and I will not allow harm to touch her."
Elara's heart raced, not with fear but with something more powerful, trust.
She had believed in herself, in Kael, and in the bond they shared. That bond was her strength now. "Desk," She stepped forward, standing beside him, and for the first time she realized she was not just an observer. She was part of the fight, part of the power, part of the story. The battle raged through the night. Magic collided with shadows, whispers of ancient spells mingling with the cries of those caught in the storm. Kale moved like a force of nature, protecting her, striking down enemies, yet always aware of her presence, always waiting for her signal.
Alara found herself at the edge of danger, facing the cloaked figure.
Pierre tried to grip her, but she remembered Kale's words. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. She focused, recalling the lessons Kale had taught her, the knowledge she had gained in the fortress, and the power she had discovered within herself. With a deep breath, she moved. Her actions were precise, deliberate, guided by instinct and intelligence. She dodged, deflected, and struck when opportunity came. To her own surprise, the figure recoiled, faltering against her unexpected skill and courage. Kale watched, a mix of admiration and relief in his gaze. He knew then that she was more than just brave. She was strong, capable, and unbreakable. And in that moment he realized something else. Love was not weakness. Love was power. It could protect, heal, and inspire. And with Alara by his side, he could face even his darkest fears. The battle reached its climax beneath the shadow of a rare solar eclipse. The moon swallowed the sun, casting the fortress into a strange twilight. Half shadow, half light, the cloaked figure hesitated, its power dimming as Kale and Alara moved together, synchronized in purpose and heart.
Kale extended his hand to Alara, and she grasped it firmly.
Dask. Now, he whispered. Together. Kale's strength and centuries of experience merged with Alara's courage and quick thinking. They were unstoppable. The figure faltered, realizing too late that the bond between them, trust, care, and love, was stronger than any curse, any magic, or any centuries of darkness. Finally, the cloaked figure fell back into the shadows, defeated but not destroyed. Its eyes glimmered with malice, promising that it would return. But for now, the fortress was safe. The night air shifted, lighter now, carrying the scent of victory and relief. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. Kale knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his eyes filled with something tender she had never seen before. "You were incredible," he said softly.
I
could not have done this without you." Alara looked up at him, breathing hard, and smiled, a mixture of pride, relief, and love. "We did this together," she said. "You and I." Heal's hand lifted to hers, holding it gently, a silent vow passing between them. "Together," he echoed. And in that word, centuries of loneliness, darkness, and fear seemed to fall away. They stood as the eclipse faded, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the shadows. The fortress, black and imposing under moonlight, now seemed less frightening, almost welcoming. Alara realized that she had changed. She was no longer the girl who had been told she could never be loved. She was strong, brave, and seen, not just by Kale, but by herself. Kale took a deep breath, looking out over the mountains. "This world is dangerous," he said quietly, "and our trials are not over. But we have faced what we could, and we have survived. Together."
Alara nodded.
"Des. And we will continue to face it together," she said. The weight of her words felt powerful. It in his life and in her own story. Then, in a quiet moment, Kale extended his hand. Not as a command or claim, but as a promise. Darts. "Alara, will you take my hand? Not as a ward, not as a follower, but as my equal? Will you walk beside me, in this world and whatever comes next?" The words were simple, but they carried a depth she could feel in every fiber of her being. "Bye," She had dreamed of being seen, wanted, and loved. But this was more than she had ever imagined.
Yes, she whispered, tears of joy and relief in her eyes.
Death. I will. Kale's hand closed around hers, firm and steady. For the first time in centuries, he felt a kind of peace, a hope that he had not known was possible. Together they stood, bound not by fear or curse, but by choice, trust, and love. The fortress was quiet now, the echoes of battle fading. The sun rose higher, scattering the last shadows, and the air seemed to hum with life. Elara and Kale walked through the halls hand in hand, their bond unspoken yet unbreakable. They had faced darkness, danger, and the weight of curses, but they had also discovered courage, trust, and love. Even as the day began, a new shadow lingered on the horizon. A distant threat, older and wiser, watched the fortress from afar, its intentions unknown. But for now, Kale and Elara had each other. And that, they realized, was more powerful than any darkness. Elara had stepped into a world of shadows, curses, and immortals, and she had emerged stronger, braver, and loved. Kale had faced centuries of loneliness and discovered redemption, not through power, but through connection. Together they had transformed fear into strength, darkness into hope, and the impossible into reality. And as they looked out from the highest tower hand in hand, the world seemed a little brighter, the shadows a little less threatening, and the promise of the future, a future they would face together, was theirs to shape.